I would like to acknowledge that this video is being filmed on the traditional lands of the Wurrundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander or First Nations people who may be watching this video today. Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner and welcome to a Books Beside My Bed video. This is my reading week from the 16th until the 21st of January. I read a lot of new and upcoming releases for January this week and I'm so excited. I had the best week. Overall in this video, I'm going to be talking about 6 books that I read that equated to 1,997 pages. So far my yearly reading total is 37 books. Now, this is taking into account the books that I read for the Romance Takeover Readathon, which I have a separate vlog for. I'm not going to be talking about those books in this video. The books and the page count don't include those books, but in case you missed it, I read 7 Days in June by Tia Williams, The Mixtape by Brittany Cherry, Make It Sweet by Kristen Callahan, Battle Royal by Lucy Parker, and the Duke I'd Like to F anthology. Those books I've reviewed in a separate video, so go and check that out. I'll leave it linked on the screen. This week, I have currently started The Bronze Horseman by Paulina Simons, and I know I'm going to struggle with this book. I'm only about 83 pages in, and it was a struggle to get through the first 83 pages, but it was a gift and a friend had asked me to read it so that I could talk to her about it, and I'm going to honour that. It's the only reason why I'm not DNFing it. I know this is going to have a deeply problematic relationship in it. It is set during World War II. It is about Tatiana, who is 17, and the war is just starting to escalate in Leningrad. And she meets Alexander totally incidentally as she's walking out one day, and she doesn't realize at the time, and he doesn't realize at the time, that he is currently sort of seeing her older sister. Yeah, I can just tell that this is not going to end well. So I will finish it and I'll talk about it when I'm finished, but I am 83 pages in. My goal is to finish it by next week's wrap up, and if I haven't, you'll know that I'm struggling. The first book that I finished after the Romance Takeover Readathon was Deceived by the Gargoyles by Lillian Lark. This is an MMMF polyamorous monster romance in the paranormal romance genre. It is about a witch and a clan of gargoyles. So this really hit on, you remember that kids TV, the Gargoyles TV show? I can't even remember the details of it, but I remember watching it as a kid. Like, that part of my brain switched on when I was reading this book. This is about Grace, who is a witch, and she has the ability, I think, to sense or read the history of paper-based objects like manuscripts and books and things like that. And so she works in a museum, and she comes from quite a prominent witch family, but she is estranged from them, and she doesn't like the suitors that her family keeps picking for her because they're trying to marry her off for alliances and whatnot. In the end, she decides to take matters into her own hand, and she goes to the bathhouse and she utilizes a magical matchmaker, and she ends up being matched with Elliot, who, when she first meets him, she can tell that he's wearing a glamour, so he's hiding his true form. He looks human, but he does admit to her that he's a gargoyle and that he's comfortable with his human glamour on, and that's all good. They get along great. They really enjoy hanging out and talking, and they start spending more time together. And what we find out is that Elliot is part of a throuple, and he really truly believes that Grace is the perfect addition that will actually make them complete. However, he hasn't told Grace this, and he hasn't told Alistair and Broderick, who are the other 2 members of his clan. And this causes some friction because he's lying, but he's so genuine about it. Like, you want to be mad at him, but you kind of can't. You kind of feel bad for him when everyone finds out the truth. But ultimately it comes down to all 4 of them getting to know each other, earning each other's trust, spending time with one another, and there are some other magical sort of subplots going on in the background. It was honestly just beautiful. There are so many wonderful side characters. We do get to see some of the side characters from Lillian Lark's other books, but even this one introduces their own set of characters and this beautiful world building and mythology around gargoyles, and I loved it. For everything that's going on, for as steamy as these books get, there is a very cozy feel to the way that Lillian Lark writes, and she's easily an order buy. Another review copy that I read this week was Forged in Fire by Juliet Cross, which is book 1 in the Vessel series. This was actually a reread for me. However, Juliet Cross is currently in the process of re-releasing the trilogy, which is, I think this was her very first book. And there's a new cover, which is gorgeous, and I think some changes have been made to the novel, but it's been a while since I read it the first time, so I'm not entirely sure about the details that were switched. This is about Genevieve, who's just turned 21, and while out celebrating in New Orleans, she's attacked by someone possessed by a demon, and then she's saved by a demon hunter called Jude, and very mysterious, but he basically warns her to, you know, stay out of trouble. And of course, there's something about Genevieve that draws these demons to her, and it turns out that she is a vessel, and that demons seek out vessels because they're very useful to them. As such, Jude ends up playing the part of bodyguard for her, and then they develop feelings towards one another. This book really sets up sort of the basis for the world and some of the world building, and has a lot of the training montages that you get when you have this set up for a chosen one type character. You also have angels in here. We've met one character in this book who's an angel, and I do have the second book for review as well, so I will be continuing this series very soon. Then after the Kate Daniels live show that we hosted in the last week, we were talking about the next 2 books that we're reading for the series, which is actually going to conclude the Kate Daniels arc of the series. I picked up and reread Iron and Magic by Lona Andrews. This is book 9.5 in the Kate Daniels series, or book 1 in the Iron Covenant series, and follows Hugh D'Ambre, who is, for the better part of the Kate Daniels series, a villain, and, you know, at best he's a morally grey anti-hero. In this book, obviously, he's the hero of his own story. This is an enemies to lovers paranormal romance story with a marriage of convenience, and it is freaking delightful. Hugh has been cast out by Roland, and he's spent the last sort of 70 odd years with Roland, and his magic has sustained him and kept him young, and now he's been cast out. So Hugh is essentially human again, and he's hit rock bottom. He's spending most of his time drunk when the surviving members of the Iron Dogs, which are the soldiers that he originally trained, come and find him, drag him out and go, no, your job is to protect us and to support us, and you're going to do that job. So he gets dragged out by his sort of commanding officers from the Iron Dogs, and they are in need of safe harbour, and so they end up striking a deal with a small community, and in exchange for safe harbour, they will provide security. And to cement this agreement, Hugh is going to marry Elara, who is the White Warlock, or the head of the community. Everyone is appropriately terrified of Elara's abilities, but Hugh has no idea what they are. And in fact, by the end of the book, he still doesn't know what they are. Hugh and Elara have the funniest relationship because they can't stand one another. They just constantly bicker at one another. Their marriage is marriage in name only for the majority of the book, and they just nitpick, but it is hilarious. If you don't like people name calling, this is probably not the thing for you, but if you know the character of Hugh, it's honestly really, really fun. And most of this is really about Hugh coming to terms with the fact that his life has changed. He is coming to grips with understanding what his relationship to Kate Daniels actually is, and that is just a glorious moment in the book as well. But honestly, I had so much fun on reread. It's the first time I've reread it, and I will be adding this to my rereading rotation because it was really fun. After that, I read Unhinged by Onley James, which is the first book in the Necessary Evils series. I borrowed it out on KU, and I know so many people who read this last year and loved it, and for some reason I didn't pick it up. I don't know if anyone has ever used this tagline to describe the book, and had they done that, I probably would have picked it up immediately because this is totally my id. To me, this book is Dexter meets Batman meets Criminal Minds, and I loved it. So it is a very, very dark romance. One of the heroes of the story is a psychopath, and he was adopted as a child and raised by a man who adopted and raised six or seven boys who had all been deemed psychopaths by psychiatrists, with the purpose of seeing if they could be molded not to be normal, but to use the tendencies that they had to rid the world of bad people. So that's where that Dexter element comes in, because they live by a code. They're all killers, and they only kill really bad people. And so in this book, we follow Adam, who has sort of these two sides. He has a very public persona. He was a former model. He is seen as the youngest playboy son of Dr. Mulvaney. And then you have the private side, the side that comes out when he goes hunting, and he is rather ruthless. And in this book, he comes face to face with the son of one of his very first victims. Noah watched as a child as Adam murdered his father, and, you know, flash forward, I think we're like 10, 12 years in the future. They've come face to face. Noah is trying to take revenge, but then Adam reveals the truth about Noah's father, that he was a pedophile. So be warned, there is a lot of this threaded through the story. So if that's triggering at all for you, this is not the story for you. And then after that, the two just can't avoid one another. They just are constantly crossing paths. They're intrigued by each other. The whole time Adam is pointing out that he can't feel love, but he is very fiercely protective of Noah and doesn't want him out of his sight. And their relationship goes from there. This one does feature a lot of trigger warnings. There is a lot of murder, there's a lot of blood, there's a lot of gore, there is childhood sexual abuse that is dealt with and the trauma that comes with that. So there is a lot going on. But for the dark topics that this book dealt with, there was also this surprising amount of levity throughout the story that never felt inappropriate, that just felt like characters and people trying to deal with really deeply traumatic stuff. So I will definitely be continuing this series, so you'll hear more about the second and third books hopefully very soon. I also read Exit 45 by Ben Sanders. This is a review copy that I received from Alan and Unwin. I am going to have a separate video out for this tomorrow, so stay tuned. This is a crime book. It is the third book in the Marshall Grade series, but you don't have to have read any of the other books because I hadn't, and I picked this up perfectly fine. Marshall is a former undercover NYPD detective who got out after being burned on one of his operations and is sort of this unlicensed PI. And at the very start of this book, he's meeting with an old friend from the NYPD who comes to him for help because he had to leave the force for health reasons and he got into some huge gambling debt and he's now being threatened. And his family is being threatened and he wants Marshall's help. But as they're talking in this restaurant, Marshall's friend Ray is killed. And Marshall then decides he is actually going to follow through on this because he's just witnessed the death of a friend. He checks in on his family and we find out that he has a connection to the wife. And it sort of spirals from there as he begins investigating and trying to unravel the mystery that is surrounding this death. Stay tuned, I will have a more in-depth video. I haven't read anything by Ben Sanders before, and it's been a while since I picked up a straight up crime mystery type book, and it was an interesting way to break up everything else that I'd been reading this week. The last book that I read this week, I was so excited to receive an early copy of this. It was Twisted Hate by Anna Huang, which is the third book in the Twisted series. These are sort of your dark romance light books. So they're contemporary romances, but some elements of them tend toward that dark romance style without actually being a full-on dark romance. So this book comes out on January 27th. This is about Josh, who is the brother of the heroine from the very first book. In that book, we knew he was studying to be a doctor. He's currently in his third year working in one of the hospital emergency rooms, and he has always had this very acrimonious relationship with his sister's best friend Jules, and she overheard him very early on in her friendship with Ava critiquing her character. And so for that reason, she's always had this acrimonious relationship with him. And the two, just anytime they're together, they just nitpick at each other and they just drive each other crazy. I think their paths cross at a bar and then they have at it. And then Jules is nearly mugged on the street, but she handles it and Josh witnesses the aftermath of it. They go their separate ways, and then Jules is currently studying for the bar to become a lawyer, and she has to wait until she passes the bar to get her dream job. And in the meantime, she's working for sort of a non-profit group as a lawyer. And as it turns out, this non-profit group also is connected to the hospital, and Josh volunteers some of his time there. They are forced to spend some time together, and they come to this arrangement where they're going to have this frenemies with benefits situation. This book is super steamy. This is probably the most enemies to lovers book I've read in a long time. All of the sex scenes in this, for a lot of the time, it reads a lot like hate sex, and there is a lot of name calling, there is breath play. Josh is very, very controlling in the bedroom, and Jules is very argumentative with him in the bedroom. It's not consensual non-consent, but sometimes it felt like that. So be aware of that going into it, because I really loved the book. I loved the dynamic, even though some of the sex scenes actually made me feel uncomfortable because they take their animosity out on each other in the bedroom. But you know what? It works for them. So those are the books that I read in the last week. In the comments, I'd love to know if you have read any of them, or if you're planning on picking up any of these new releases that are coming out in the next couple of weeks as well. If you want to let me know that you're here but you don't want to leave a comment, feel free to leave a flame emoji down below. Otherwise, I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I'll see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.